So, Julian, I was reading your last review from my favorite New Zealand critic, TJ McNamara.
Oh, man.
I noticed that he said it's the same abstruse references.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think...
Abstruse references and inside jokes.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't see it that way. I see it as... well, I mean, he's got a problem. He's got a problem with what I do. That's the thing, you know. So he thinks it's all obscure, but you know, to me, I think it's all real. He thinks. I mean, the thing in New Zealand is that people always think I'm trying to make a joke or pull the wool over their eyes.
Right.
That's the thing, and he, you know, he always thinks that I'm trying to make a joke, and a lot of people think that because, as you know, there's a strong element of humour and irony in what I do.
Well, what do they think the joke is?
Well, that's what I don't know. I think they think that the joke is that I'm not really an artist and I'm making fun by doing this art, which is not really art, and I'm just kind of, it's a gag, you know? I think they think it's a gag.
But that's what's funny about McNamara, because strangely enough, he's been your most attentive critic.
He loves me, yeah.
Right? I mean,
yeah.
No one, he's written, what, 40 reviews of your art?
Yeah.
I mean, no one has paid you that much attention other than this man.
Yeah, he won't leave me alone, yeah.
Which seems to me, it means he understands exactly what your art's about. He's seen it all, he's looked at it for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so there should be nothing abstruse about it, that your art should be developing its own syntax of abstraction that each successive exhibition needs to be engaged in. So you would see that no one would be more appropriate for judging the contribution of each successive show than McNamara.
Well, I guess you're right, because actually probably what the story is probably he may well be that he's typical New Zealander, but it could be that he's the real deal. I think that I mean I don't take him seriously. I think he's a good writer, but I mean my view on it, David, is that you know, it's what our grandparents fought for in the war was freedom of speech, and you know, he should be allowed to say whatever he wants.
Right.
And I just wish that someone else in New Zealand would work the other side of the coin, basically. And I think that a lot of people think that the kind of art that I'm interested in is going to go away, and it's just like this kind of passing fad.
Right.
But I think he's probably waking up to the fact now, well, actually he's been reviewing it, what is it now, 28 years, and he realises that I'm not going to go away, and this is reality, actually. And so for the latest review, what he did was he just read it, basically copied out the press release, you know. We wrote a comprehensive press release. But yeah, he's a non-believer, you know, he's a non-believer.
Well, I mean, that's what's... Come here, Doctor. I mean, that's one of the things that's amazing, is that even if he's a non-believer, you can see that because your art demands a kind of history for its own engagement, that it's making a language that can be approached in, that's making all sorts of connections, that's representations are not towards nature but towards past art history, that its content comes in those relationships and that conversation and that commentary, and that even if that doesn't provide him a sense of visual pleasure, at least it could provide him a sense of pleasure in a historical sense.
Well, I guess it's also the problem of how he sees his role. You know, does he see himself as a critic or a reviewer? And I guess there's a difference. You know, he sees himself as reviewing the show. Right. I mean, there is as I understand, there's a fundamental difference between a critic and a reviewer. But it's interesting, you know, like when Tony Cormer from Art Forum, he picked up that book that we published all the reviews. He said, "Oh, this is hilarious," you know. Etc., etc., and he took a while to actually realise that the book was real. He thought I'd made it up.
Right, he thought it was fake because it was so nasty.
So nasty.
So consistently hostile to your practice.
Yeah, and the thing is, I said, no, it's real. All these reviews are real, and they're all bad, and they're from the same person, and they all say the same thing. And he said, well, it's like if you're having a restaurant in New York, and the reviewer comes in and says, I don't like Indian food.
Right.
You say, well, okay, that's fair enough. It's an Indian restaurant. so go away. You don't have
Yeah,
to
they
come
don't
back
come
again.
back.
Yeah.
Right, but this man's come back for 20 years.
28 years.
28 years.
Yeah, to come back and
Right.
say, I don't like Indian food.
Exactly.
Yeah, so-
You just can't leave it alone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting we're talking now because, I mean, I think they're digging, they're taking the concrete out and they're putting in a new drain. Yeah.
I mean, it is funny because your art is so much an engagement with a very restricted legacy of international modernism. But the fact that you're a New Zealand artist engaging that gives it an international currency that plays very easily here in the United States. But you would think precisely because that international currency, it would be very accessible in New Zealand and so forth.
Well, I remember you saying to me when we did the retrospective, you know, because I said to people, oh, I've got this retrospective in America, and they just kind of stared at me. And you said, yeah, that's like telling them you've also got a holiday home on Mars. You remember that?
Well, I don't remember that, but
Yeah.
that's because of the two kids.
Yeah.
So-
But, you know, like it just goes completely
Right.
over their head.
Well, I do remember about your retrospective when we were in Sioux City doing one of the panel discussions, saying something about, I know that Julian's art is tough, and having someone from the audience say, no, it's not. You know, I was expecting them to
Yeah.
sort of me have to convince them, but even
Yeah.
in Sioux City, Iowa, the audience here needed no convincing because they understood the vocabulary
Yeah.
immediately,
The-
and they needed no one to prove its value.
Yeah.
The value was a given.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that whole currency was already established.
Yeah, interesting. And that's why I feel the empathy for working in Australia, Europe and America. You know, I think in New Zealand there's a consistent opinion that I'm like a troublemaker or making jokes of some sort,
Right.
or trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, so to speak. And I think that now what the advantage is, David, I've got time on my side. I've got 28 years on my side. So people say, well, okay, he's not going to go away. He's a consistent troublemaker.
Right.
So that they look at it this way. I said yesterday, I talked about this idea of the triangle. You got like American art post 1950, and you got European conceptualism, and then you got me at the other edge of the triangle. That's how I'm kind of fond of describing where I'm
American
coming from.
art, European conceptualism, and then
Yeah.
New Zealand Dashper.
Yeah, and I'm not comparing myself to those
I'm just-
other two great things.
Right, I'm just looking at the triangulation.
Yeah, and I talk about this now in lectures sometimes. you
Yeah.
know? Like the kid that picks up the stick from the wrong end and runs like crazy. You know?
Right.
Like, because, I mean, as you know well, that I mean, my shtick, so to speak, is that I looked at the American modernism.
Julian, where are we going?
We're just going for a walk, sweetheart.
Yeah, where's this description going, Julian?
Well, you know that I looked at all these two things from a distance,
Yeah,
and I saw things in them that perhaps that you guys didn't.
right.
But you know what I wanted to say was that I don't think it was just the fact that I got sick after the. Is this Elizabeth? This one, or is because there's a house down.
There is a house down here, whatever the street's called.
Yeah. I think that the retrospective in America was very much a turning point for me in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah.
You know, because having the authenticity of that and the kind of belief
Right.
from yourselves.
Did that validate your
Yeah.
career in a different kind of way?
Exactly. Yeah, but it also kind of, I think it all kind of started kind of post Martha in a funny kind of way, David, because I remember, well, funnily enough, I remember putting my work up at the locker plant on show, and you know it was pretty simple, as you know, and I explained to the cleaners who were cleaning around, you know, I said, oh, this is all, you know, this is all the art, you know, better not shift it. And
Right.
be careful. And they said, oh, you know, we know. You know, we know.
Right.
We've been around stuff like this for a few years now. You know?
Yeah, the lock, right.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't have to kind of explain it or reinvent the wheel each time. And so that felt good, you know, like I felt kind of a sense of I'd come home a little bit, I think, you know.
Sure.
And I was just, it was always my particular interest was American art, you know, from Jackson Pollock onwards. You know, I thought it was very interesting. To me, it encapsulated the whole dream of art, the grand possibilities of what it could be. You know, it could be so enormous.